What's good, everybody? This is Robo from Allbark back with another college football video, and today I'm giving you my Week 9 picks. Last week was unfortunately my first negative week as I went 26-28 against the spread, 36-18 picking winners though, and the season total was still looking solid. My favorite picks of the week still haven't been coming through for me, although I still can't believe that Iowa lost last week. Just a heartbreaking ending on the Iowa side of that one. We're right back moving on to this week though, starting with the Week 9 slate starting on Tuesday. Tuesday night we've got two games this week, starting with New Mexico State at Louisiana Tech. Diego Pavia has led the Aggies to a 5-3 record at this point and has looked much better than either Tech quarterback. Although it's a road game, I'm more confident in New Mexico State having enough to win this one, 30-28. The second game of the night is Liberty at Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky is actually debuting a new style of helmet with different mascot logos for each position group. That should be pretty cool to watch in action, but with Liberty coming into this one undefeated, it's going to take a sharp game out of Austin Reed to knock him off. And I can't side against this Liberty team right now. I've got them winning this one, 34-27. Wednesday, we've got Jacksonville State as road favorites at Florida International. Jacksonville State continues to impress in their first FBS season, and they shouldn't have any issues taking care of business this week. I've got them by a final score of 28-17. Also Wednesday, UTEP heads over to Sam Houston State, who is still looking for their first win of the year as they enter as home favorites again. It's hard to trust a team who hasn't won a game, but UTEP has been awful throughout this year, and I honestly believe Sam Houston is a better group. I'm going to go with Sam Houston 21-17 at home. Thursday night, we've got a couple tough games with Syracuse at Virginia Tech starting it off. This should be a really close game, although likely low scoring. I think Virginia Tech has looked better than early on recently, and they should have the atmosphere to help them out here. I'm going to take the Hokies close, 27-23. Next is an in-state battle with Georgia State and Georgia Southern. This is another game that could go either way, and honestly, I just have to side with Georgia Southern at home. Both of these teams have played well this season, and I do trust Darren Granger as the quarterback spot more. But as a team, I think Georgia State has enough to get a win here, especially at home, 31-28. Just one game Friday night again, this time with Florida Atlantic heading up to Charlotte. Florida Atlantic has looked solid recently outside of the UTSA loss last week, and Charlotte just has not shown they can put up any points on the board. I'm siding with the Owls this week, 24-17. Kicking off Saturday, we've got Florida State at Wake Forest. Florida State's been incredibly resilient this season. I do think Duke covers pretty easily last week if Riley Leonard plays the whole game, and I still do have some questions about that FSU defense. I think Wake has little or no chance of an upset, but 20 points is too many to lay for me on the road, so I'm going to go with the Noles by a 38-20 final score. Number 6, Oklahoma heads to Kansas after narrowly escaping UCF's upset bid last week. Kansas still has some quarterback questions with Jalen Daniels questionable. If he isn't able to go, Jason Bean has impressed enough to keep Kansas in this game at home, in my opinion. I think Oklahoma stays undefeated, though, as I've got them picking up a 38-31 win. Number 10, Penn State looks to bounce back at home against Indiana after the rough offensive showing in Columbus last week. I think Penn State has just been too vanilla on offense to be able to pull off those big wins like last week, but it's more than enough to blow out lower-level teams like Indiana here, as I've got Penn State taking this one 41-6. 1-7 UMass heads to West Point to take on 2-5 Army. Despite both teams having poor records, Army has been far more competitive at this point in the year, and Army should be able to move the ball on the ground against this UMass defense and control this one. I've got them winning this week 31-21. Boston College takes on UConn after an impressive win over Georgia Tech. This UConn team is bad enough that Boston College will be able to keep it rolling at home in a big way. I think they can win this one by at least 2 scores. I'm going to go with a 34-20 final score. Maryland looks to bounce back from back-to-back losses this week on the road at Northwestern. Ben Bryant is still questionable for this one, and I think Maryland is much better than they've looked recently. Off a bye, I think they get it rolling again with a 31-17 road win. Texas A&M hosts South Carolina this week with both teams looking to snap losing streaks. It's been a disaster season for South Carolina so far, and I don't see it getting any better this week. Only 12 points against Missouri last week is pretty telling on top of a rough injury report. I think A&M takes this one 34-17. Houston pushed Texas hard last week in an impressive showing and now hits the road again and take on a surging Kansas State team. Houston has improved quite a bit over the season, and 17 points is a pretty big spread for this matchup. K-State showed they can cover it last week, but I'm thinking Houston keeps this one somewhat close as Kansas State grabs a 35-20 win. UCF took Oklahoma to the brink and nearly sent the game into overtime last week. This week they're back at home taking on West Virginia. I was really impressed by the way the UCF offense looked with Plumlee back, and I think they should be able to get a win this week with him getting even healthier. I'm going to go with a 34-27 final for the Knights. SMU looks to continue their strong stretch of games this week, hosting Tulsa. Tulsa just got embarrassed by Rice last week as home favorites, and if that level of play continues, it'll only be worse this week. I think SMU wins this one easily with a 38-17 final score. We've got an in-state directional battle this week with Eastern Michigan hosting Western Michigan. I think Western has looked like the better team this season despite the record, as the strength of schedule has been rough. Eastern's offense has not been able to do much, but this could be a spot for them to get going. I'm actually going to side with the Eagles as home underdogs here, 24-21. It should be a really close game. Clemson suffered their third ACC loss of the season last week at Miami. and now has to refocus to head up to NC State for another conference road trip. A big question is going to be if Clemson is even motivated to put forth their best effort at this point. If they have their heads on straight, I like them to take care of business here 28-17. Memphis at North Texas may make a run for highest scoring game of the week as it sits with the highest total at 68. This one could be a fun one as both teams can put up points and neither has looked great defensively. I think North Texas keeps it close, but Memphis pulls out a road win as the better team, 34-30. Georgia's back in action this week as they head down to Gainesville, Florida to take on the Gators. No Brock Bowers for Georgia is huge news, but it may benefit them in the long run figuring out more of the passing game without him. However, for this week, I'm going to side with the Gators to cover the 15, but I just don't see Georgia losing this one. I've got a 31-20 final. Texas is without Quinn Ewers for the next few weeks, which means it's likely Malik Murphy time with Arch Manning possibly in consideration. They'll take on BYU this week in Austin, and personally, I'm hoping for a strong showing out of Malik as he stuck it out at Texas despite Ewers coming in and Arch being the presumed next guy up in the future. This is not a confident pick, but I think BYU has a good enough defense to give either quarterback a bit of a challenge, but Texas should be able to handle it business at home, 34-17. Utah's moving up the rankings after continuing to own Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, but this week they've got another huge test as they host number 8 Oregon in a battle of one-loss Pac-12 heavyweights. Bryson Barnes showed me a lot last week, but Oregon is a far better team than USC in my opinion, especially defensively. I think Oregon takes this one on the road, 27-20. Notre Dame is back off a bye, taking on 2-5 Pitt. Pitt coming off a rough loss to Wake Forest. I think Notre Dame controls this game from start to finish behind a big game from Audric Estime on the ground and some dominant defense as they get a big 34-14 win at home. Duke gave Florida State a huge challenge last week before Mike Elko decided to sit Riley Leonard down with that ankle injury, and that'll be another question this week as they're on the road against number 18 Louisville, looking to avenge that bad loss to Pitt 2 weeks ago. Jawar Jordan is questionable for Louisville, and the same goes for Leonard for Duke. Both injury statuses will have a huge impact on this game. I'd stay away from this one until we get more clarity, but I think it'll be close either way. As of right now, I've got Louisville grabbing a 27-24 win. Auburn sits at 3-4 on the year as they host 4-3 Mississippi State fresh off a 7-3 Arkansas road win. I still do not trust this Mississippi State team at all, and the same goes for Auburn, but at home I feel more confident as they were able to hang with Ole Miss last week, so give me Auburn here by a 28-20 final. Minnesota picked up an incredible road win at Iowa, although with some luck with a crazy ending. This week they're back at home up against Michigan State. Michigan State has a lot of issues to fix, and they got some tough transfer news with Simeon Barrow entering the portal. This is a hangover spot for Minnesota, so it makes it an ugly game to predict, but I think Minnesota wins this one at home 23-17. Nebraska hosts Purdue in a must-win game for Nebraska's bowl hopes. I think Matt Rule has done a decent job with what he's had to work with this season, and spirits are high right now in Lincoln. I've got Nebraska picking up win number 5 this week, 27-20 over Purdue. Miami, fresh off the Clemson win, will host Virginia, who also comes off an upset win of their own as they shockingly took down North Carolina on the road last week. Tyler Van Dyke is listed as probable for this one, and his status is huge as I think Miami can cover here if he's healthy. I think Virginia comes back down to earth this week as Miami grabs a 35-14 win at home. Baylor hosts Iowa State in what looks to be one of the closer matchups of the week. I still find it hard to trust either of these teams on a weekly basis, but Iowa State has looked pretty solid in the majority of their games recently. I think even on the road, they're able to sneak away with a tight victory in this one, 23-17. UTSA is back home to take on 1-6 East Carolina. After falling to Charlotte last week, there's just no way I can expect them to look any better this week as UTSA is a much better opponent. I think UTSA wins this one by 3 scores, 34-14. Appalachian State hosts 1-6 Southern Miss Saturday afternoon. Southern Miss coming off a 55-3 beatdown at South Alabama. There's just no way I can trust them to keep this one close either, despite App State dropping back-to-back games. I think App State bounces back in a big way here as they grab a 38-20 win at home. We've got a solid MAC conference matchup with Ohio and Miami, Ohio both sitting at 6-2 heading into this contest. I was a bit disappointed last week with Ohio struggling against Western Michigan. I could see a similar thing happening here as Miami, Ohio is a better team than Western and definitely can play this one tough. I think Ohio grabs a 24-21 win at home though in another tough battle. Number 22 Tulane sits at 6-1 as they head into their road matchup with Rice, who just picked up a dominant win thanks to another strong performance from JT Daniels. Rice is definitely capable of giving Tulane a fight, but they've been somewhat up and down this year, and Tulane has looked really solid with the lone loss being against Ole Miss without Michael Pratt. I'm going to continue to trust Tulane here to pick up a 38-24 win on the road. After back-to-back losses, USC hits the road to take on Cal, and this is really a tough game as you have to question motivation for USC. The defense has been terrible this season, and Cal has shown a solid offense so far. I think Cal is able to score enough at home to keep this one close, but USC pulls away and grabs a 38-27 road win to get back on track. Louisiana Monroe looks for their first Sun Belt Conference win of the year as they host Arkansas State this week. Neither team has impressed through 7 games, although ULM has kept games close outside of South Alabama. I think they've shown to be the better team so far, and they should pick up a win this week at home, 27-24. South Alabama and Louisiana face off with both teams sitting at a 4-3 record on the year, but South Alabama a game ahead in conference and with home field advantage. After what they did last week, I think they've got it cooking right now on all cylinders, and they should be able to take care of business again this week at home as they pick up a huge conference win, 34-23. Wyoming at Boise State could be one of the more interesting games of the week as Boise looks to avenge that incredible collapse last game at Colorado State. I think the ground game is going to be vital here for Boise's chances. They've got a great rushing unit. They should be able to control this game because of that, and I think they get a big bounce back win in this one, 31-24. Marshall at Coastal Carolina is another fun one in the Sun Belt this week, but Coastal's had some tough news at quarterback as Grayson McCall is doubtful for this one. If he was able to play, I'd probably lean Coastal, but without him, it'll be a tough one for their offense to take control of. Because of that, I'm going to side with Marshall by a touchdown, 27-20. Number 5, Washington got a huge scare last week against Arizona State and has to refocus as they head down to take on 2-5 Stanford. I would be pretty surprised if Michael Penix played that poorly again, especially with how close they were to losing that game, and all their goals are still out in front of them. Give me Washington against a really bad Stanford defense, 45-17. Air Force sits at 7-0 on the year as they enter this one on the road at Colorado State. It's been an up and down year for the Rams as they've pulled off some incredible wins and taken some really tough losses. But with the way Air Force is moving the ball right now, I have a hard time seeing Colorado State taking this one. Give me the Falcons, 31-17. Tennessee at Kentucky under the lights could be a phenomenal game to watch as Kentucky should be well rested off the bye and Tennessee looks to bounce back after the Alabama loss. Both teams already with 2 losses on the year and having some up and down performances. However, at home, I like to think Kentucky as a slight underdog is able to establish the run game a bit to help them knock off Tennessee this week, 27-24. Troy will be road favorites this week at Texas State with both teams sitting at 5-2 overall and 2-1 in the Sun Belt. Texas State has been a pretty big shocker this year as not many expected them to be as good as they've been. But Troy is a really tough matchup for them, especially with that defense. I've got to go with Troy here, even on the road, 28-21. Ohio State is in hangover territory this week after the big-time win over Penn State, as they'll be on the road at Wisconsin, who looks like they've got a pretty decent defense and maybe found it a little more on the offensive side last week at Illinois. But Ohio State found some success against a tough Penn State defense and continue to dominate defensively. I think they should be able to handle Wisconsin with an inexperienced quarterback in Braden Locke, 31-14 Ohio State. Ole Miss took care of Auburn last week and now gets a layup at home with Vanderbilt. Vandy has pulled off some upsets before, but with their defense this year, this should be a pretty easy game for Judkins and Dart, as I think the Rebels come away with a 41-21 win in this one. Colorado is back after the bye on the road, taking on number 23 UCLA. This one should have a good amount of offense, although UCLA is a much stronger team on the defensive side of the ball. I would expect Colorado to come out really hungry and ready to put that Stanford loss behind them, especially with Travis Hunter healthier after that bye week. But I think UCLA is a far superior team right now, so I've got them taking this one 38-24. North Carolina looks to bounce back in a big way after the Virginia embarrassment as they're on the road again at Georgia Tech. ACC is still up for grabs for North Carolina, so the heads have to be up still. I think this is a solid chance for them to get back on track offensively. I've got them winning this one 38-23 on the road. James Madison looks to stay perfect as they host Old Dominion this week, who has taken some games down to the wire this year and just upset Appalachian State. However, this James Madison defense has been absolutely incredible, especially at home, so it's tough to expect much out of Old Dominion this week. I think JMU keeps it rolling and stays undefeated with a dominant 34-13 win. Arizona State sits at just 1-6 on the year, but has looked a lot better in recent weeks entering this matchup with Cam Ward and the Washington State Cougars. That Washington game last week gives me some pause on taking the Cougars, but the turnovers were the main issue at hand for Washington. I think Arizona State comes back down to earth a bit this week, and Washington State's able to pick up a win on the road here, 31-20. Oklahoma State will host a really struggling Cincinnati group Saturday night in Stillwater. Emory Jones does not look good whatsoever lately, and Oklahoma State continues to impress on offense. I think they keep the high-level play up, especially in the night game at home. Give me the Cowboys here, 30-21. Number 11 Oregon State heads down to Arizona to take on maybe the most dangerous 3-loss team in the country in the Wildcats. This may be a popular upset pick as Arizona absolutely destroyed Washington State 2 weeks ago. The quarterback situation will be interesting for Arizona as Jaden Delore may be back, but Noah Fafita has been playing really well. However, I still don't know truly how good this Arizona team is, and I feel pretty confident in Oregon State with that offensive line, so give me the Beavers here, 34-28. Nevada picked up their first win of the year last week as they pitched a shutout against San Diego State. This week they'll play host to New Mexico. After last week's defensive showing, I think Nevada may be in position to start to turn their season around, and New Mexico is a much worse opponent than San Diego State, so I'm going to go with Nevada here, 27-24. Fresno State is back off the bye, hosting 6-1 UNLV, who still has only lost to number 2 Michigan in Ann Arbor. But I think this is where that changes, as Fresno State is a really tough opponent, especially in Fresno with a late kick. Mikey Keene's status is big, as he's listed as questionable for this one, but I think Fresno can get the job done regardless. I'm going to go with the 31-20 final. San Jose State will make the long trip out to Hawaii this week as they enter this one as road favorites, and for good reason, as Hawaii was flat out embarrassed last week at New Mexico, mainly due to a terrible defensive performance. Hawaii will likely continue to struggle on defense this week as San Jose State can put up some points, and I've got them taking this one 34-24 in Hawaii. Alright, now it's time for my 5 favorite picks against the spread this week, starting with Boston College taking down UConn. After last week, I'm much more bought into Thomas Castellanos in this Boston College offense. I think UConn has a lot of questions on both sides of the ball, and as long as they play smart football, BC should be able to get an easy win at home this week. Up next, I really like Nebraska to take down Purdue this week with a really winnable spread at 2.5. Nebraska's been pretty tough to trust this season, but this is a good spot for them, and Matt Rule could have his group going bowling this season if they're able to pick up a win here. Even with Purdue off a bye, I think Nebraska is able to get it done at home this week. Next, I really like Louisiana Monroe to pick up a win at home against Arkansas State. Despite not having a conference win at this point, they've kept almost every game close and could be in a much different spot than they are with some better late game results. I think this is the week they get that win against a bad Arkansas State team. My 4th pick is going to be Oklahoma State under the lights in the Stillwater over Cincinnati by at least a touchdown. I think the way the Cowboys are playing right now, this spread could have been at least in the double digits, especially with Cincinnati's struggles this season. This is a tough environment and a tough team to go up against, and I don't see Cincinnati pulling off an upset here. My last pick for this week is going to be Fresno State at home against UNLV. This does depend on Mikey Keene's availability, as I'm under the impression he'll be able to go. But I really like the Fresno State defense regardless, and I think even without him, they're able to keep UNLV in check enough to give them a good chance at covering the spread under the lights. That's it for my Week 9 picks. As always, let me know your favorite picks down in the comments this week and which games you're most excited to watch this week. Other than that, thanks for watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.